Hey, lovely. It's Lisa here, and I'm delighted today to participate in Brian Cormack Carr's Tarot Tools Trio tag, a tag that's almost as fun to say as it is to do. Yes, us tarotistas participating in the Tarot Tools Trio tag. Woohoo! Today! Ta-da! Wait. Anyway, yeah, this tag, it's one of those tags. I mean, we just love these tags that invite us to take our capacious and ever expanding enamoration. I don't think that's a word, with tarot and boil it down, right? I was thinking the other day, like, the only thing I love more than tarot is more tarot. And it just, the collections keep expanding, or our book collection keeps expanding, our knowledge keeps expanding, we keep learning more and more, gathering more spreads, gathering more artifacts and objects. And there's that delight of kind of being invited to say, today, who does mommy love best? Who does daddy love best? So, what I love about this tag, though, is it's not just saying what are our favorites. It's inviting us to do a very specific thing, which is to think about, like, what would be the toolkit. What would be the essentials. And when I first started exploring this tag and thinking about it a couple days ago, I was very moved by Kasha's wonderful, as always, her wonderful response on Tarot Map. And, she was approaching this as from the standpoint of traveling. She's going to go away, what would be the decks she would take with her. And that's how I was started to think about it, too, because I, too, will be traveling. I'll be gone for a month, mid-March to mid-April. I will be on a Greek island. Do you fucking believe it? It's like an extraordinary opportunity once in a lifetime. So I'm going to be spending a month in a little stone cottage on Ikaria, Greece. Yeah. So, what would I take with me? But then I realized I didn't want to explore the question that way, partly because, the decks that I take with me, that's not so interesting, at least for me right now. Instead, I was thinking, what are the decks that I absolutely need to have? What are the true heavy hitters? If I'm like facing a spiritual emergency, what is the tarot deck or decks that I need to have? And then the answer kind of rolled out pretty easily. Although I'm cheating, I'm going to have 4 decks rather than 3, and I'm sorry. No way could I get it to 3, and I'll explain why in a second. But, the heavy hitters, like the powerhouses of the powerhouses. And so, that starts for me, it starts with the Toth, right? It starts with, in fact, the Greenie, the 1980s edition. Not this one, because the one I had, I burnt up in the fireplace of the apartment I was renting because it was freaking me out. But this is one I've gotten since from eBay. There's nothing like the Greenie. I mean, just the quality. I mean, not the Greenie per se, but the Crowley's deck itself. And the Greenie is, I think, beautiful. And the format, the size of it, and the heft of it, the color, the vibrancy of the colors is offset by the green borders. This deck, it just screams power and depth, the symbolism, Lady Frida's art. It's, oh my God. I mean, that Ace of Cups. And that Ace of Cups. I mean, just, there are times when you're just going to want to bring this bad boy out, when nothing else will do. This is the Fool you need. Right? Similarly, every tarot toolkit, at least in my view, has to have a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. But which one? So for me, the answer, it's sort of a no-brainer. It's the Albano Waite, right? I mean, it is, again, and this is a vintage copy, like ounce for ounce, pound for pound, Frankie Albano's accurate color tone, as he called it, back in 1968. I mean, this deck is just doing something that no other Rider-Waite-Smith deck does. It's not my favorite to read from. My favorite to read from is the Borderless. I'm like Simon at Two Spirit in that sense. The Borderless that's the one that I want with me. The one I carry in my bag is, Pam's Vintage or Pam's Original, but this is, you know, again, if there's a spiritual emergency, what do I need? I mean, I need this guy. And this guy is so fucking powerful, pardon my French. You know, this is on my altar all the time, my main tarot altar. And there's a big old crystal on it because, like, I got to keep this bad boy from, like, floating up to the ceiling. Yeah, the Albano weight. And then, you know, every tarot toolkit needs a deck that represents the powerful thrust of indie decks that doesn't have human figures in it, and that takes us to a different place, a different quality of the heart, a different quality of the spirit, of the energy, and of course, it's the Wild Unknown, and this is the first edition. You know, this is what we need. You know, there are moments when nothing else is going to do but Kim crayons. You know. So it's the Wild Unknown. That's an important card for me this year. The Three of Discs, Three of Pentacles. And I think particularly, even though this is not the one I usually read with, I usually read with the mass market, but it's got to be the first. It's got to be the first. Okay. So those are three, but you know, no toolkit would be complete without a Marseille, a version of the Marseille. And the one hands down for me is the Jean-Claude Fournoy version of the Dodal Tarot, the 1707, printed in Lyon, so it's not even literally a Marseille deck. It's just, it's, you know, this quirky type 1 Marseille. The colors are incredible in this reproduction. I keep showing it upside down. Let's see if I can find my favorite of all of the cards. I love the cups. They're just, these cups are so capacious, so cupitudinous. Oh yeah, here we go. Well, this is the Knight of Cups, but actually the Page of Cups. He's the one I was looking for. Oh, well, I can't find him. But, you know, this deck, yeah, you know, gotta have my Dodal. So, those are the 4 decks. I couldn't get it down to 3. Okay, books. Also had a hard time getting it down to 3, so I'll start with the 2 that I'm cheating with. So it's you know, Rachel Pollack, gotta have Rachel Pollack. And I think these are such beautiful companion volumes, you know, her earlier writings and then her more recent one. You know, Tarot Wisdom is just a beautiful book, but I think it becomes more powerful when you've read it in the context of 78 Degrees of Wisdom. These are books that, you know, you can read cover to cover. You can, like, read them all the way through, or you can use them as reference books. Yeah, gotta love it. And then in terms of thinking about tarot and psychology and self-growth and self-development, Arthur Rosengarten's, this came out in 2000, Tarot and Psychology. It's really smart. It's really detailed. He, you know, articulated ways of thinking about the tarot in relationship to psychotherapy that had been talked about before, but he brought like a rigor and a clarity to them. And he's out with a new book, and he's going to be both at Newt's at the Northwest Tarot Symposium and at Reader's Studio, and I'm going to see him at both places. Thrilled. He's got a new book called, I think, Tarot of the Future, or Tarot and Future. So I'm excited to see what he's up to. Okay, so that would be my second choice. And then this is a book that's on my bookshelf, and I have not read it. I have opened it. I have flipped through it. But, so this is a little bit of a, what do I want to say, a little risky of a choice. But I think trying to wrap one's mind around Kabbalah and tarot is incredibly important. And this is the book. This is the book for grappling with that. And you know, you gotta love a book that has, you know, has the Sephirot in beautiful color in its frontispiece. So, you know, it's got historical information. I'll just hold this so you can see the a little bit about the table of contents. It's got historical information, and then it's got a discussion of the Sephirot. And he's very learned, and it's a classic. So, haven't read it, but nonetheless, it's going to my toolkit, because it's a book that I think I ought to have read by now. So, okay. So there's that. The third of the Tarot Trio tools, Tarot Tools Trio, is spreads. And, you know, there is something about the number 3. So, you know, it all for me begins with, let me see if I can do this a little bit better with my whiteboard. It all begins with the 3-card spread. A number of people have been talking about that. You know, like Kasha, she talks about this a little bit. You know, the sort of the open reading where you're reading the cards, you know, as if you're reading something moving through time. You're sort of seeing the whole sequence of the cards, but you're seeing how they flow together. It's a style of reading that comes from Jodorowsky. Yoav Ben Dov talks about it. Enrique Enriquez takes it to like a whole new level. It's an incredibly powerful mode of reading. So almost always my life begins with, whether it's for me or for someone else, with a 3-card spread. But sometimes, rather than doing an open reading, I want to do what I call the chariot reading. And the chariot reading, if you think about the chariot, you've got the charioteer, and then you've got the white sphinx horse creature and the black one. So you've got the central figure in the chariot being flanked by these 2 competing forces. They're 2 wings here. And so often, and sometimes I'll lay out a spread and I'll think, you know, I'll think that it's a spread that needs to be read in an open way, sort of flowing from left to right, like a sentence almost, marking transformation of the sort of substance, the symbolic substance moving through the cards. And what I'll see, and this happened with my the reading I did at the end of my discussion, my flip through of the Vachetta Tarot, it was really clear the central card was death reversed, and it was clear that this was not an open reading, it was a chariot reading, and so I read it with this card being balanced out by the 2 wings. And often I'll read that as light and shadow, sort of what's coming into prominence or coming into focus or coming into the light, and what's maybe submerged a little bit and needs to be considered. So it all begins with a 3-card spread for me, and whether that's an open reading or a chariot reading. Oh, yeah, and sometimes, okay, and that's spread number 1, 3-card spread. Sometimes what I'll do, I like doing this particularly when I'm reading for others, is I start with a 3-card spread, but I have a kind of process by which I have the querent, the seeker, pick out basically 2 significator cards, and then these end up being a kind of what's in the light and what's in the shadow. And so I end up with a configuration that looks like that. The other day I did a reading for a couple, and I had the husband did one of these with one deck and the wife did another with another deck, and I put the 2 together. So I had 2 5-card spreads next to each other. And so I'll often like just do kind of a building block of one spread upon another, but the base is that 3, you know? We love the number 3, we humans. You know, it's the Trinity. It's creation. It's you know, mother, father, child. It's you know, head, heart, and body. You know, it's subject, verb, object. It's the structure of an English sentence. Okay. The last spread. So that's kind of like 2 spreads there, the 3-card spread and then adding the 2 to make it 5. And the last spread is, again, building off of 3s. This isn't working so well, but hopefully you can see what I'm pointing to. Starting with, it's the same idea as the chariot spread, except it's laid out vertically. So I have the central card, 3 cards drawn, the light and the shadow, right? Oh. Hopefully you can see this. It's like boink. Maybe I should go to video school so I can actually make a video that you can watch that's not so painful. Okay, thanks for bearing with me. And because it's a 3-card, a 3-card by 3-card by 3-card spread, 9 cards, then you can start to read it also vertically. And what I do is then I have the left 3 become a reading of the past, present, and future influences. So it becomes then a reading through time, reading these triads. So you can read the triads here and then the triads across. Okay, blah-de, 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 blah. Hopefully that made sense and you could see that. So now the wild card. The wild card is, for me, you know, no spiritual toolkit is complete without an altar. And this is my little travel altar set. I've shown this off before, but just quickly I'll show it again. So this is a, I'm actually sure what that stone is, but it's not malach. It's probably a form of jasper, because it's always jasper. When I don't know what it is, it's always jasper. So this is a little incense stand. There's a little hole there that the stick incense goes into. And then this is the sort of portable altar that keeps this little dorje, that the Vajra tool that Kasha actually sent me with a little love mail. And then there's a candle, there's some incense in here, there's a little bitty figure of the Buddha. Very sweet. And a little piece of aventurine that I set the Buddha on. And this becomes my little portable altar. But I also have a small Buddha that I love that sits on my desk, and it's really heavy. This is from Japan. I got it from, I think, the Zen Mountain Monastery store. It's very heavy, cast iron, like those beautiful Japanese teapots, the little ones that you can get that are also beautiful and heavy. And so, you know, really, this would probably be my spiritual tool that I would want to take with me, because if you've got the Buddha, you have an altar. You don't need anything else. Okay, that is all I've got to offer. Thanks so much for watching. As always, thanks for your practice. And Brian, thank you so much for your wonderful tag. Bye.